You know, actually, I did something this weekend that I've done for the last couple of years. I ran a race yesterday in Jacksonville. Actually, my son Luke has got us to do this. We've done this for the third year in a row that we've done this. It's called the Gate River Run in Jacksonville, and it's the 15K National Championship. About 20,000 runners run a 15K, which is 9.3 miles. And this race is just sort of the adrenaline of 20,000 runners running that distance, and it's sort of exciting. And you start out right next to the Jacksonville Jaguar Stadium, and then you run about a mile west towards downtown Jacksonville. You go around downtown a little bit, then you go over a bridge across the river that goes through downtown Jacksonville, and then you go through all these neighborhoods. And what's special in the neighborhoods, there may be 20,000 people running the race, but there are probably 25,000, 30,000 who come out and cheer, coming along, just going through these neighborhoods around Jacksonville, and it's amazing. And one of the highlights, there was a lot of signs people would have up, but people would be handing out food. Some people would be handing out Krispy Kreme donuts, slices of bacon, sausages, beer, some things, and all sorts of things in the race. But the signs were memorable. Most were the signs, run, Rachel, run, somebody, family member, but some people had good comedic signs. I remember one going through the race was, Kanye thinks Beyonce deserves your medal. Because, I remember you see the Grammys where Kanye thinks Beyonce deserves every award, every prize that has ever been given. Another one, and this one didn't register to me, it says, Chuck Norris never ran 9.3 miles. But my favorite was, there was this older couple, they were both about 80, and they were sitting in these old lawn chairs, and in between them they had this big sign, and they had sort of a scowl on their face, and the sign said, "Worst parade ever." I loved it. I almost fell over laughing when I saw that sign. Can you imagine? Because you're just watching 20,000 people, sweaty, smelly people run by, and worst parade ever. But what I love about this race is at about 7.2 miles after you leave all these neighborhoods along the river in Jacksonville, you head back over towards the downtown, the shipping district, and you go over this Hart Bridge, which is the one that's equivalent to it in Tampa is the Sunshine Skyway. It's a big bridge. It's about a mile up and then a mile down. After you've run 7.2 miles, a mile uphill slope. We're flatlanders here in Florida, right? There's not a hill. You can go over the bridge past Freedom. That's the only hill you can find in New Tampa that you can run on anyways. But you go a mile uphill, and it's a killer. I had to walk yesterday. I'm not in as good a shape as last year. I was able to run up the whole hill and not stop. This year I haven't dragged the train as much, and I remember walking a lot of the hill. But there's a moment, gives you goosebumps when you reach the top of the bridge and you're looking down into the Jacksonville Jaguar Stadium, and it's all downhill for the last 1.1 miles. And you have this feeling that comes over your body and says, "Well, I made it." And you're still 1.1 miles from the finish line, but you know what? If I fell down, I'd roll there, And sort of that's what life is like, because sometimes there are moments where you think, I can't go on. And then you see what the future has, and it's amazing. I thought of that as I was working on the sermon, coming and thinking about it, coming back from Jacksonville yesterday. These readings, the Old Testament and Gospel reading, go together perfectly because they talk about adversity, but lifting your eyes in faith and seeing what God has in store. The Old Testament reading is this rather obscure passage in Numbers, the book of Numbers, where there was the children of Israel were camped and there were poisonous snakes. They were complaining about God. They were saying, "God, why did you bring us out of Egypt? We had no snakes in Egypt." And Does anybody like snakes? No, I've never really, there's a few people who do like snakes. And you know, back I remember here, we have a big campus, 46 acres. I remember the first 8-9 years, I was the only guy on campus. There was about 60 women teachers. And you know what you'll see occasionally on this bigger piece of property? A snake. I remember I've gone and they say, Pastor Dave, there's a snake on the playground too. So I go grab a shovel and I go walk out to that playground. I find the snake. Usually it's a black racer and I say, oh, this is a good snake. We're going to keep it. Let's just shoo it off the playground and be riddance with it. A few times I've looked at it and said, that's a pygmy rattler. Do you know what I do then? Off with that. Throw the remains in the woods and all that goes on. You know, my version is let's get rid of it. But you know what? What does God do in Numbers 21 when there's snakes everywhere? He doesn't say, they say, let's get rid of these snakes. No, God says, if you're bitten, Moses make a bronze snake and put it on a pole. And if anybody's bitten by the snake, what do? They look to the bronze pole and they'll be healed. It's not what you or I would do, but this is what God decided to do. He said, look at this bronze pole and you're going to be healed. God didn't take away their problem, but he gave them an answer and a solution to their problem with the bronze snake on the pole. Do you know, John chapter 3, Jesus quotes this passage. And it happens when Nicodemus was a wealthy member of the Sanhedrin, and in the middle of the night he came to Jesus. He wanted to talk to him, but he wanted to do it sort of on the QT. And so he came in the night, and he said to Jesus and started talking to him, Jesus, I know, Rabbi, you've got to be from God, because if you're not from God, you couldn't do all the incredible things you're doing, all these miracles. And Jesus talks to him and said, you know what, Nicodemus, you need to be born again. Nicodemus, what? Can somebody go back in their mother's womb a second time? That's impossible. And Jesus said, no, you need to be born of water and the Spirit. And then he says to Nicodemus, just as Moses lifted up a bronze serpent on a pole, the Son of Man, talking about himself, I need to be lifted up. People need to look to me and believe in me. And I'm sure Nicodemus, he doesn't get all his questions answered. I'm sure he's scratching his head and thinking, what in the world does he mean by that? But if you read later on in the Gospel of John, in the 19th chapter, Joseph of Arimathea owns an empty grave, and Nicodemus, this wealthy member of the Sanhedrin, comes with 75 pounds of aloes and myrrh and take Jesus down from the cross and get him ready for burial and bury him in the tomb. And I imagine as they did this, Nicodemus is thinking, well, maybe this is what Jesus meant when he said, I must be lifted up. And you need to look to me and believe. You know, we don't have an account whether Jesus ever appeared to Nicodemus after he rose from the grave. I sort of feel he did. He was around a long time. And I'm sure, Jesus came and, said, now I get it. We look to the cross. And we look for God's grace there. We celebrate the grace that he has given us as the people of God. Do you know, that's one thing that we need to always emphasize, and I think sometimes people get on the wrong track. There's one thing, especially emphasized in Lutheran theology, it's called the theology of the cross. And the theology of the cross says, the one place where we can understand God better than anywhere else is to see him and to know him as the Son of God who died for us. And it doesn't mean he takes away all of our problems, but it means that God is there in the midst of our problems saying, you know what, I care, I understand, and I'll always be there. The cross says we have the grace of Jesus, and no matter what our circumstances, we know it's there. You know, I think about that, climbing that bridge yesterday, saying, when am I going to reach the top? You know, the great thing about a bridge in a race like that, you can see the top in the distance. But have you ever had a bad stretch of life? A bad period? And you don't know when the end is going to come. The promise Jesus makes to us is that he's there. He says, look at me and believe in me. The one danger we have, I sometimes thinking of, is sometimes people confuse the glory of God and forget about the grace and the whole message of the cross. I read something that disturbed me this week. Actually, I don't remember if it was in the Tribune or on the web. One of these television pastors was asking his viewers to all donate $300. I think he was asking 6,000 to donate $300 so he could buy a jet. Creflo Dollar. Did anybody see that in the papers this week? So Creflo Dollar was asking 6,000 people watch him on TV, all donate $300 so he can get a personal jet. My blood pressure jumped a little bit when I saw that, you know. I read that and I think, you know, that isn't a theology of the cross. Sharing in the suffering and the hardship of people. Jesus didn't have his own jet. He could have made one, you know. Boy, that would have wowed him, right? You open the eyes of the blind and you take off, you know. And so that's not what Jesus did or would do. Do you know what? A great example of what Jesus would do is, Tuesday. Yesterday was Pi Day. Today's the Ides of March. Tuesday's another holiday, right? St. Patrick's Day. I remember I used to teach Latin in school, and I stopped about 5 years ago when we put more intensive Spanish in the program. But when I used to teach Latin, the hardest thing I made the kids do, we would read from the actual autobiography of St. Patrick. And he was a rather amazing fellow. Do you know what nationality he was? English. Not a drop of Irish in him. And do you know what happened? He was a teenager walking on the beaches in England. And one day, Irish pirates came, attacked the town, robbed people, and grabbed about 20 people and made them slaves. Patrick was grabbed out of England and taken and was made a slave in Ireland. He spent years there as a slave. He learned Irish. He knew everything. He knew a lot about Ireland. But he was dumbfounded because nobody there had any idea or ever heard of this person, Jesus. He escaped a few years after he was kidnapped. He got a boat back to England. He went back home. But he talked with the local priest there and said, you know what? They don't know anything about Jesus over in that place called Ireland. And he studied and he went back to Ireland to tell them about Jesus. Could you imagine going back to the place that kidnapped you and made you a slave? That's what Patrick did. And they made him sort of their national saint, their national hero, because you know what? That sort of love, that sounds like Jesus, right? I'll give my life to the people who kidnapped me and beat me and made me a slave. That's the theology of the cross. Jesus challenges us no matter where we're at. And you know what? With all these problems, Jesus doesn't say, well, I'm going to get rid of your problem for sure. You know what? sometimes problems they make you stronger. And you know what hills, when I'm running, they make you stronger. They make me feel like flatlands, that's easy. And in your life, when you look back at the problems you've had, have you ever had a problem? They usually make you stronger, don't they? When you think back about it now, they make you better. They make you appreciate God's blessings. But we all live with the promise and the blessings of Jesus, who loves us just the way we are. He says, lift your eyes. Look to me. For God so loved the world. For God so loved you that Jesus came into this world, died for you and me,